Let's talk about the history of film and how independent filmmakers and disruptors have always been a critical part of the filmmaking industry. Film started in the 1800s. Around 1880, 1890, they figured out how to make moving image reels. So that was the dawn of film, and it took off. It was wildly popular, and things that are wildly popular often get commercialized. So what ended up happening was in 1908, the Edison Trust, yes, Thomas Edison, which was based in New Jersey, was basically operating like a cartel. So they kind of had a monopoly on the filmmaking that went on in the East Coast, and they would charge filmmakers exorbitant fees to try and make their movies. So in 1910, people fled the East Coast to go west to try and make their movies without these exorbitant fees. Where'd they go? Hollywood. And what happened after that? They established the studio system. So initially, the studio system was as a reaction to the monopolistic system that was in place on the East Coast. Pretty interesting, huh? We don't think about the studio system as an independent movement, but when it was first founded, that's what it was. Also interesting that from 1912 to 1920, women had as much power in film as men. Women were doing a lot of the important roles behind the camera, directing, producing, writing. They were also starring. So at this time, when film was still in its early stages, women held a lot of power and they had a lot of creative control in and around the filmmaking industry. Also interesting that in 1916, the Lincoln Motion Picture Company was established in Hollywood to try and create more films by and about the Black experience. So even then, we had diversity initiatives that were trying to create a more interesting and varied cultural ecosystem of filmmaking and filmmakers. Then in 1919, United Artists was formed. That was the first independent production and distribution company that was founded by artists in order to make the work that they wanted to make. So one of the most noteworthy members was Mary Pickford, the silent film star and producer. There was also D.W. Griffith, Douglas Fairbanks, and of course Charlie Chaplin. So United Artists at that time, it was formed by artists. Artists were the ones banding together to create that company. But by the 1930s, the studio system was still very much in control. So that was RKO, Paramount, 20th Century Fox, Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer, and Warner Brothers. Then 1939 and 1945, portable cameras were invented for the war. Now, obviously that's not a great reason, but it did revolutionize independent filmmaking because it made cameras more portable, more affordable, more easy for people like you and me to carry around. Then, 1958, the Supreme Court created antitrust laws ruling that the studio system was illegal. So after that, the studio system was disbanded and the golden age of Hollywood was over. The 1970s came along and independent filmmaking was flourishing. And it also started to bleed into Hollywood blockbuster films, especially with the work of filmmakers like George Lucas, who now we know is a huge name, but at the time, he started as a very independent, kind of edgy documentary maker before he did Star Wars, then Indiana Jones. So these kinds of indie filmmakers were starting to take their gritty aesthetic, Scorsese with Taxi Driver, taking their aesthetics into Hollywood blockbusters as they kept creating movies. 1983, an incredible year for women. We had Barbra Streisand create Yentl, and she was the first woman to write, direct, produce, and star in her own feature film. It's an amazing film, and she's, of course, an amazing artist. So, quick moment of acknowledgement for Barbra Streisand. The 1990s, we saw digital filmmaking explode. So it wasn't just film canisters anymore. We had digital cameras and independent filmmakers, people who, just like you and me, were starting to make movies left and right. It really revolutionized indie filmmaking. Then in the 2000s, YouTube made it possible for independent creators to distribute their own content straight to an audience, straight to consumers. This was a huge watershed, which brings us to the present. February 2004, the launch of Facebook. October 2010, the launch of Instagram. September 2016, the beginning of TikTok. We are currently seeing an avalanche of creative control for artists. As you can see from history, actors have always been multi-hyphenates, and they are at their most powerful when they are controlling the vertical. Controlling the vertical means they're controlling production on up through distribution to reaching the audience. So that is when an actor really has the most flex, the most power, the most say over what kind of work they're able to do. And you can see this playing out right now with A-list stars. People like Jordan Peele, Tyler Perry, Margot Robbie, Mark Wahlberg, Ryan Reynolds. Most of the A-list stars now have figured out that the best thing that they can do is to create their own production company. Because with great responsibility comes great power. How does the idea of creating your own vertical make you feel? Excited? Scared? Inspired? I think it's the way forward, and I can't wait to see what you do.
The Vermilion podcast is sponsored by Vermilion, a home for artists. We offer classes, coaching, and community for creatives and innovators in the arts. If you're ready to find your voice and build the life of your dreams, we're here to support you every step of the way. Check out clubvermilion.com and schedule a free call today.